In today's video, the tree stand on the ridge behind me, affectionately known as the Huntagon. With purchasing a new property, I wanted a box blind. I was left with the decision, do I purchase a deer stand or do I build one myself? In today's video, I'll give an overview of how I built this tree stand. Obviously, I chose to build one myself. I'll discuss how I chose the location to place that tree stand, and in the end, we'll talk about if there's anything that I would change if I had to do it again. Today, it's the Huntagon. It has been a busy couple of weeks and months since my wife and I bought woodland and a small cabin. We quickly furnished and made the cabin our own. My wife did a great job, although modestly decorated. It definitely feels cozy and homey. It's a great place to get away from the everyday work of the farm. As you can imagine, on the day that we settled on the property, I immediately deployed some trail cameras. So what I have been finding on the property will be upcoming in my future hunting videos. But in today's video, we're going to talk about the tree stand that I chose to build to be placed on this new property. Now, I did check around on some prices of pre-built tree stands, and in fact, the previous owner had one of those pre-built tree stands on the property. I was able to see that tree stand and the location that it was placed during our preview and our first look at the property before we made an offer on it. But that tree stand did not go with the property, and the previous owner took it before settlement. That left me with the decision on whether to purchase a tree stand or to build my own. Now, the answer to that question for me is I was going to build my own. While there's absolutely nothing wrong with pre-made tree stands, in fact, there's some great options out there. For me, some of the greatest enjoyment was the process of actually building the tree stand. Now, I am by no means a carpenter, but I do enjoy the fact that you can take some raw materials, use some skill and some time, and put them together and end up with something useful and something custom made just for you. I decided to build an 8-sided 6-foot by 6-foot tree stand, and I placed it on an 8-foot by 8-foot base. Now, there were several considerations into the size and the base of the tree stand. I definitely wanted a bigger base so that there was a bit of a landing, so to speak, at the top of the steps. That's right, I was going to have steps that were going to lead up to the tree stand, and I wanted that extra space as a landing to make it easier to access into the tree stand and to leave. Now, the 6-foot by 6-foot 8-sided tree stand, there are lots of plans online, and I loosely followed some of those while customizing it to fit my needs as I went along. I also decided to build this tree stand at home on my farm where all my tools were, completely assemble it, then transport it with my trailer to the new property. One of the customized steps for this tree stand was that the base was built with a 12-degree angle so that I didn't need any additional braces or angles for the post to add stability when the tree stand was in the air. That 12-degree angle on the base was built directly in. I chose to use 2x8s for the base so that I had plenty of meat in the end. I could put 6x6 posts under this tree stand when I finally elevated it at its final resting position. I used 3/4 inch pressure treated plywood to top the base. I also glued that plywood to the floor along with nailing it, hoping to eliminate any squeaks. I used 2x4 studs for the sides, and of course to create those angles, I cut those 2x4s in half, re-glued them, and screwed those studs together. My next important decision was the windows and doors. For the door, I simply reused an old takeoff door that used to be on my farmhouse. For windows, I got a great deal. In fact, I got free windows from a local builder that did a remodel. He saved the old windows because he felt they were too good to simply just throw away, and then he offered them for free. I snatched those up and ended up using 3 of those windows on this tree stand. To top the tree stand, I chose to use a metal roof. I weighed my options both in cost and labor to put on either shingles or metal. In the end, it seemed like a wash, and I chose to put a metal roof on top of the Huntagon. The last piece of the puzzle was to build a stairway that led up to the tree stand. Again, I wanted to prefab this and have it built before I transported it to my property. That meant I had to do some head scratching if I was going to use 8-foot posts underneath it, but yet they were angled at a 12-degree angle. How high would the actual tree stand be, or the base of the tree stand? I did all that figuring and came up with a stairway that was going to lead up to that height. I also wanted a handrail on the side of that stairway, not only for Grandpa to access the tree stand, but also if other younger people were going to be using it. I wanted entry and exit to be as safe as possible. So I built the steps and handrail and left them disconnected from the platform to transport the tree stand to the new property. Next step was to transport the tree stand from my farm to the new property, where I would ultimately do the final work needed. One of those last steps needed was to paint the tree stand. I left it unpainted simply because I didn't know how the transport process would be and how rough I would be on the exterior of the tree stand. In the end, the transport went very well, and I spent the time to paint the tree stand while it was at my new property. After paint, it was time for the worst step, in my opinion, of the whole process, and that was transporting the tree stand for the final time from my cabin to the top of the ridge above the cabin. Now, I chose that location because it is one of the highest points on my property. The location has some great views, and I thought would be a good place for this tree stand. Now, as a disclaimer, I will probably never archery hunt out of the tree stand. In fact, I built this tree stand and chose this location based on gun hunting and late season hunting. Again, I'll probably never archery hunt out of the tree stand, although it would be possible. For me, I wanted this tree stand to be in a location that would be good for gun season when it can be extremely cold and harsh weather, and in a location where if I was to have guests hunt with me on the property, it would be a good option for them as well. As I already mentioned, transport to its final position up on top of the ridge, although cameras don't do angles and steepness justice, I was definitely puckering as I was transporting this tree stand up to its final location. At this point, I was worried if I tipped the tree stand over, all of my work up to this point was going to be for nothing, but the trek up the ridge went without a hitch. Well, except for the swarm of bees that we hit. I got stung several times. I had good help guiding me up the ridge, and when I got to the top of the ridge, we chose a fairly level location and then began putting the 6x6 post to elevate the tree stand 8 feet up in the air. Now, that was a bit of a process getting the stand to be level on not perfectly level ground, but in the end, I think we did a great job. I had some great help, and the tree stand in its new location turned out great. For my final thoughts and reflecting back on the build and if there's anything that I would change, as you can see, the 3 large vinyl windows, well, they are noisy to open those windows. It seems no matter what, you cannot open those perfectly quiet. You don't think about opening a window and making noise until you're in a wooded area and you're hunting and you want to be extremely silent because there are deer close by. With the used vinyl windows that I used, quiet is nearly impossible. That's where my homemade glass windows that are hinged come into play. On each of the corners of the stand, I made my own windows out of glass and a wooden frame and then hinged them to the side of the tree stand and have a nice closing latch. Those windows can open near silently, and they're vertical windows, meaning if you did choose to archery hunt out of this stand, it would be doable. But my idea behind it is because the vinyl windows are noisy, the 3 large windows are made for viewing and seeing and getting a good view of the area all around you. If it comes time for a shot, you can quickly and quietly open one of my homemade glass windows that are on each of the corners of the hunting blind. In the end, I also chose to tint those windows. Originally, I didn't think I would. For me, self-filming, camera light can be extremely important. And if you have dark tinted windows, using a camera in low light can become even more difficult. But with all that said, I did choose to tint the windows, very large vinyl windows and the homemade vertical windows in the tree stand. You could simply see right through it. And as I already mentioned, the tree stand is located on the top of the ridge, meaning any deer approaching up over one side of the ridge or up over the other side of the ridge could potentially see straight through the tree stand, one side to the other. I tinted the windows myself with some 20-degree tint. It definitely adds concealment while you're inside the tree stand. So now I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever built your own tree stand, box blind, deer lookout? If so, what has been your pros and cons of your homemade tree stand? If you'd purchased a pre-built tree stand, I'd also love to hear from you. What brand did you buy and what has been your experience? What are the pros and cons of that particular brand? I'd love to hear from you guys, so please put your comments down in the comments section. By the time you see this video, our opening day of deer season will have come and gone, and although I won't be in the Huntagon at the beginning of our archery season, I will be hanging free, so plenty of hunting videos are just around the corner. I want to thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.